So, in our final session on early church history, we are going to talk about the rise of the papacy. That is how the office of the Pope that we know of from church history in just before and during the time of the Reformation, right? This single figure with absolute authority in the Western church, right? How did this office emerge? Okay, so early in the New Testament church, the leadership was pretty much how the Reformed Church has it today. Only elders and deacons, right? But in the second century, right, among this plurality of elders, an office of bishop emerges. Okay, now we know that the New Testament does speak of bishop, but we believe that the bishop is just an elder is a bishop, right? It's the same thing. But in the second century they had this office of a single bishop over the entire church, the entire congregation emerged. So each local church will have a bishop. Now, when the bishops emerged, okay, all bishops were considered equal, right? No one bishop was above any other bishop, right? But due to perhaps some of these bishops trying to seeking to increase their own influence and power, and maybe also because of the fact that the church was growing and there was not enough bishops to go around. Over time, bishops would come to preside over larger and larger groups. So go from a single congregation to maybe a few di- a few local churches. So it's a diocese of bishop. Right? So some over time some gain prominence, and then over time yeah you have another rank, another head in the hierarchy, like a metropolitan uh, bishop, right? And eventually some cities, right? So each city will have a bishop, and uh some bishops, these five bishops gain gain prominence. So they're known as the five patriarchal bishops of Antioch, Alexandria, Jerusalem, Constantinople, and Rome. Right. So the bishops of these important cities uh, gradually came to be called patriarchs, and eventually Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem lose importance, and that just leaves Constantinople and Rome. And you can see sort of the east-west divide coming in here, since Constantinople is in the east and Rome the west, and both of them also trying to seek power for themselves. Actually, more the Rome side trying to seek more power for himself. So so as we see a pattern in the leadership structure of the church, right? From the plurality of elders, of leaders, with no one central figure of authority. Over time, right? It sort of tapers to the top, and you have central figures emerging, and then eventually you have these very important bishops. Now, what is the Pope? Okay, I mentioned bishops, but where does the Pope come in? As you may already know, the Pope is simply the Bishop of Rome. Okay, and the word pope is derived from the Latin word papa, which just means father. And actually, the word pope was used to describe was given to particularly important bishops, right? Not just the Bishop of Rome. So you could see mentions of Pope Cyprian. You can see mentions of Pope Athanasius, right? So it's important guys. But in the east they used it a bit more liberally, but in the west it came to specially be designated for the Bishop of Rome alone. Okay. Now some of you may know of the so-called Patron theory of explaining why the Bishop of Rome should have the preeminence among all the bishops. Right. So it's the idea that Peter was granted some sort of preeminence, some sort of authority over his fellow apostles. And then Peter, as it is said, allegedly was the Bishop of Rome. Now, we actually have no evidence that Peter was actually the Bishop of Rome at any point in time. He did visit Rome, it seems, and there is a good probability that he even died in Rome. But we do not see evidence that he was Bishop of Rome. And yet, so that was, but still that was accepted that Peter was the Bishop of Rome. And so the theory goes on, right, that Peter's successor likewise will have authority over his fellow bishops. And by the time Gregory the Great, which I will talk about, comes onto the papal throne in 590, this theory is generally accepted. Okay, but I don't want you to get the idea that this theory in its full form emerged suddenly, and then suddenly, as a result of that, the papacy was the papacy became preeminent among all the bishops. Right, this didn't happen just like that. And you can make claims, you can say one thing, you can say these sort of things, but whether people actually are going to follow you, you can make these claims to authority, but whether people acknowledge your authority and really do as you say is another thing altogether. So there had to be other factors, right, that gave the Bishop of Rome real power, right? Not just a theoretical basis for his power. Okay. So here we have a letter which shows us the sort of preeminence the Bishop of Rome thought he ought to have, at least, right? And yet, and appeared to have been given to him customarily. Okay, so the occasion of this is again Athanasius, right? A character that we have mentioned here and there, right? And you know of his role in the Arian controversy, and after the council at Nicaea, that wasn't the end of it, unfortunately for Athanasius' fight, right? He would suffer exile because when the Arians gained imperial favor, they cook up some trumped up charges against Athanasius and have him deposed and thrown into exile. And this is all happening, recall, in the eastern side of the church. Okay, so the Bishop of Rome in the west. And he writes, the Bishop of Rome, after hearing about what happened, writes to the council that deposed him. And why were we not written to about the church of Alexandria in particular? Do you not realize that it has been the custom for word to be sent to us first? That in this way, just decisions may be arrived at from this place? If therefore any suspicion was directed against the bishop there, word ought to have been sent to the bishop of this place. But they neglected to inform us and proceeded at their own pleasure and on their own authority. and now they wish to obtain our approval of their decisions, though we never condemned him, which is Athanasius. This is not in accordance with the constitutions of Paul or the directions of the traditions of the fathers. I am informing you of the tradition handed down from the blessed apostle Peter. Okay, now what constitutions of Paul he referring to? I really don't know, right? But this is apparently what was written. So by tradition, by custom, you must come to the Bishop of Rome first and for this sort of judgment. So that was that that apparently was the custom and what the Bishop of Rome, at least this particular Bishop of Rome, felt himself entitled to at the time. Okay. Another document from church history, the Council of Constantinople in 381. Right. The third canon states the Bishop of Constantinople, however, shall have the prerogative of honor after the Bishop of Rome, because Constantinople is New Rome. Okay, so they have a place of honor, right, accorded to the Bishop of Rome, right? But it could just be it could just be just honor. Doesn't mean that we grant you authority and we will do whatever the Bishop of Rome says, right? But you can see then that at least even if they did not say that the Bishop of Rome had authority over all the other bishops, there was that acknowledgement of a special honor due to the Bishop of Rome, right? I guess not so much because they really not so much because of the ultimately because of the Patron Theory, but because of maybe how important Rome was, right? And then maybe after that the Patron Theory developed, right, to sort of bolster that effort, that idea, right, of the Bishop of Rome being important. So how did the progress how did this progress happen of the increasing power of the papacy? Right, so it was a gradual process, and like I mentioned earlier, the vast power of the Bishop of Rome did not just emerge overnight due to this Patron Theory. Uh, The Bishop of Rome initially just regarded as like first among equals, like I mentioned earlier in the Council of Constantinople, right? That just give him a place of honor, right? But strictly speaking, bishops are actually equal, right? No one has really authority over other bishops. However, as you know, it's part of human nature to try to want to seek power and to control others. And these bishops, successive bishops of Rome, saw it their uh, saw saw it that it was their part to control and to have authority over many matters in the church, and then also on civil matters, right? So successive bishops of Rome actually made advances in their power, trying to expand their spheres of influence, right? And while they did so, concurrently they also developed the theological basis, like the Patron Theory, and uh, and made stronger and stronger claims about the authority of the office, right? So the two factors, or the two roads went hand in hand. The road of actual political maneuvering, right, and the making of these claims. So grab more power and then make these claims, right? And you can't just make the claims alone, right? You claim this and claim that, you claim power over everything under the sun, right? Not people are not necessarily going to follow you. Like the East would frequently resist the overtures of the West, right? In them trying to exercise their power. Yeah. Right. So in tracing the development of the rise of the papacy, right, uh, we cannot locate it purely in the theoretical, right, that theological basis. Right? It cannot be divorced from history, what actually happened in history, and this is what I'm going to talk about. Right? So, what happened that made the Bishop of Rome particularly powerful? So, as you know, as I mentioned before, the capital of Rome was moved from Rome to Constantinople. So the capital of the empire moved, the seat of power of civil authority moved to Constantinople, and by the towards the end of the 4th century, Rome was really not doing well. Uh, lack of leadership in Rome, threats from barbarian invaders, right? And amidst this vacuum of leadership, right? This moment of crisis, the Bishop of Rome was looked to for unity and stability, both by not just as a matter of the church unity and stability, but of the city itself, of the population itself, the entire Roman community, and and I guess it's something that tends to happen in history in the time of crisis, right? A strong central figure tends to emerge that people rally around, right? And so this is something that happened, right? The Bishop of Rome, right, managed the started to manage the affairs of the city, right, as well as the church, right? Social services, caring for the poor and the sick, right, setting up shelters and hospitals, all done, by the church. And gradually, right, the Bishop of Rome was taking charge of civil matters as well as religious matters. So Innocent, the first is the first of a few popes that I'm going to talk about that are particularly important when looking at presidents and and how their power of their office increased. So Pope Innocent the First became Bishop of Rome in 402, and he made the claim that no important decision was to be made in the church without his approval. So anything important that the bishops are deciding has to come before his death first. That was one of the claims that he made. And in the East, when the whole saga of Chrysostom was happening, right, Innocent the First came out in support and voiced support of Chrysostom. And particularly important was when in 410, Rome was sacked by the Visigoths, and it was this occasion of the sacking of Rome by the Visigoths that the pagans put the blame on Christians and said this happened because the Christians made us forsake the old gods, and this was what prompted Augustine of Hippo to write his reply to them, which is the book The City of God. So this was that occasion, and Innocent the First was very instrumental in negotiating with King Alaric of the Visigoths to save the population of the city and and stop him from burning down the city. So So it's just sacking, like taking of plunder, but he saved the lives of his negotiations saved the lives of many of the Romans, right? Saved them from the Visigoths actually burning down the city. So if you do something like that, that is going to give you a lot of legitimacy uh to claim power. So that was Innocent the first, and after that we have Leo the first, considered by many to be the first pope in the modern sense, right? Uh, he was the Bishop of Rome from 440 to 461, and in his time he proved to be a very capable and uh and brilliant person, right? Once again during his time, once again Rome was under threat of invaders, and in 452, right, Attila the Hun was threatening to come and attack the city of Rome, and Leo marched out as head of the army. So this is something that will happen with the popes sometimes from this point on. The popes actually come out as head of the army, right? And he somehow persuaded Attila the Hun to leave the city of Rome alone. Now, we never know what took place in that conversation between Leo and Attila. How he managed to persuade Attila to turn back and to leave Rome alone, right? But he pulled that off, right? Saving the city from the destruction of the Hun invaders. And in 455, right, he could not prevent the Vandals this time from sacking Rome, but Leo negotiated, right, just as Innocent did with Alaric, negotiated with Gaiseric, the king of the Vandals, and Rome was spared from being razed, from being burned to the ground. So in exchange for that, right, allowed 2 weeks of sacking, right, in exchange for not razing the city to the ground, and that again saved the lives at least of the Roman people. And Leo the First, right, was also a writer, a theologian, right, wrote a tome against Manichaeans, if you remember the one of the heretical groups, right? And the Donatists, uh, the schismatic church, right? So this was Leo the First, right? Probably the most capable man until uh, the most capable man to occupy the office until Gregory the Great. So that's Leo the First. So here is an excerpt from an edict by the Emperor Valentinian the Third in 445. This is during the time of the papacy of Leo the First. Inasmuch as the preeminence of the apostolic see is assured by the merits of Saint Peter, the first of the bishops, by the leading person of the city of Rome, and also by the authority of the Holy Synod, let not presumption strive to attempt anything contrary to the authority of that see. For the peace of the churches will only then be everywhere preserved when the whole body acknowledge its ruler. And this is from an edict that is condemning a particular bishop. Okay, I forgot his name, right? For opposing the authority of the bishop of Rome, right? So you see the name the apostolic see, right, which is the see, the part of the church that the bishop of Rome oversees, right? Called the apostolic see, and this name actually came from also one of the earlier the earlier bishops of Rome, Damasius the First, right, who called it who called the Roman See the Apostolic See. Right? And yeah, by the way, one of the things that that guy did also uh was to commission the translation of the Latin Vulgate, right, by Jerome. Right. So that again will also lend some prestige and legitimacy to the office of the Bishop of Rome. Okay, so that was Leo the First, very prominent, very capable man. Okay, Felix the Third, Bishop of Rome from 483 to 492. The Chalcedonian controversy, right? Controversy concerning the natures, whether Christ has one or two natures, right? And also other things by Acacius, the Bishop of Constantinople, right? That Felix really did not like. And as the saga developed, okay, it was a bit complicated, and at the end, Felix actually deposes and excommunicates Acacius. So this is the Bishop of Rome deposing and declaring excommunicated the Bishop of Constantinople, which is supposed to be like which is supposed to be his eastern counterpart. Like if the Bishop of Rome can claim absolute authority in the west, then so should Bishop of Constantinople absolute authority in the east. But if you but of course they never actually operated like that. But Felix here demonstrates, right, how much the he does what the bishops of Rome think that they eventually think that they have the authority to do, right? Depose and excommunicate the Bishop of Constantinople, right? And of course, just because you declare him excommunicated doesn't mean the whole Eastern Church is going to say yes, he's excommunicated, right? So there's schism. So it's not that they will really just appoint a new bishop, so that it led to schism, and it's a schism that won't heal until 519. And I know it's not early church history, but the Great Schism in the 11th century is also something like that. When the two bishops, Rome and Constantinople, excommunicate each other. Yeah, Felix the Third. Okay, and his successor, Galasius the First, Bishop of Rome from 492 to 496. He made the claim that the Bishop of Rome had authority over both civil and religious matters. Okay, so earlier we saw that that in reality the bishops of Rome had already begun to exercise fill key leadership roles in the civil sphere, right? And of course we wouldn't say can't say that it's really out of them trying to stick their fingers where they ought not to, right? But it was really just a vacuum of leadership, and they just stepped up to save as saviors of the people, so to speak, right? But here the claim is made that the Bishop of Rome has God-given authority over both civil and religious matters. So this is what Pope Gelasius writes: there are two powers, August Emperor, by which this world is chiefly ruled, namely the sacred authority of the priest and the royal power. Of these, that of the priest is the more weighty, since they have to render an account for even the kings of men in the divine judgment. You are also aware, dear son, that while you are permitted honorably to rule over humankind, yet in things divine you bow your head humbly before the leaders of the clergy and await from their hands the means of your salvation. And if it is fitting that the hearts of the faithful should submit to all priests in general who properly administer divine affairs, how much the more is obedience due to the bishop of that see, which the Most High ordained to be above all others, and which is consequently dutifully honored by the devotion of the whole church, right? So you see here the logic, right? So there are the logic of the teaching of the two swords, right? The two powers, right? The religious power and the civil power, but they are not equal in authority. The religious power, right, is more important, right? Why? Because they deal with things of greater importance, right? Divine judgment, right? Eternity, things of eternity, right? Things of the soul, and and so the the logic goes that they should they then should have more authority, right? They then should have authority over the civil powers, right? And so the civil powers will rule over civil matters like a vice regent to the religious powers, right? But the religious powers actually have authority over both civil and religious matters, right? So just as the just as everyone, right, submits to the priest in matter of faith, the king also should submit to the priest, to the bishop of Rome. Right? So this is uh, the theory, the claim, right? And a very clear demonstration of that is in 800 when Charlemagne is crowned the Holy Roman Empire. And who is it that places that crown on Charlemagne's head? The Bishop of Rome, right? That and so and so you see, if the civil power gets its power invested in it by the church, right? Who is the real power here? Okay, Gregory the First, right? Also known as Gregory the Great, was Bishop of Rome for 14 years, from 590 to 604. So actually, I jumped over. If you recall, the last guy that I mentioned, Galatius, was the Pope until 496. I jumped over almost 100-year period to come to Gregory the Great. Not to say that nothing important happened in between, but there was actually a lot of struggle. There was a lot of power struggle in the 100 or so years in between, right? With rival popes coming up and all that sort of thing. Right? But in 590, again, Rome is in a state of crisis. Right? And they're not just under threat from invaders, right? This time it is some people called the Lombards. There's also plague, pestilence in the city, and help from Constantinople seems to not gonna come, right? And certainly it was a time that the people could have been given over to despair. But Gregory came to the fore, when he became the Bishop of Rome. He immediately set about, right, to take charge of food distribution, right, in the city, taking care of the sick, and he also took charge of rebuilding, right, the defenses of the city, right, and even the troops of the garrison, right. So he was actually a sort of military, having some sort of military leadership role already, right. He has some in a de facto sense, right? And his effective leadership in organizing the affairs of the city and the defense of the city, right? And then going and negotiating with the Lombards, right? He he saved the city, right? The Lombards eventually did not attack Rome. And so once again, right, for the third time we see a bishop of Rome actually saving the people of Rome from being killed by invaders. And missionary endeavors, right, commissioned by him, also enlarged his sphere of influence. Um, we remember in our talk on the monastic movements, right, that Augustine of Canterbury was sent by this Gregory, to go to England to evangelize the people there, right? So that was that's one of the ways, right? Whether he intended it as that or not, right? That's a different thing, but it did happen that because of that, his influence also extended, right? So he commissioned the missionaries to go out, and when they go out and they set up churches, those churches then come under the authority of Gregory, right? But apparently there is a story that Augustine of Canterbury did try to go and approach the Celtic Christians, the Christians who were there as a result of Saint Patrick's earlier efforts, right, and try to bring them under the umbrella of Gregory as well. But that apparently didn't work. Right? And Gregory also had commissioned missionary endeavors into Spain, right, and converted quite a bit of the invading barbarians as well. Uh, and so these missionary endeavors actually granted him more power. And he apparently also tried to exercise power in France, right? Tried to go to the Frankish rulers, but the Frankish rulers would have none of it. Right? So this was Gregory the Great, right? So here I only talk about him in regards to the expansion of the papal power, but Gregory was also a writer, right? And some of his writings actually becomes Roman Catholic doctrine, but unfortunately, right, uh, there was included purgatory, right, which was supposed to have been from Augustine, but for Augustine apparently it was more speculative, but for Gregory he made it like certainty, right? But he was also but that aside, he was also a prolific teacher, right? He was still a prolific teacher of orthodoxy in other matters. Now, if you remember, right, this this problem of always wanting to be the first, the greatest, is not something that uh, the disciples of Christ did not suffer from. Right? In Luke 22, we read that there was a strife among them, right? Not the only time, right? There was a strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. And Jesus said unto them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors. But ye shall not be so. But he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he that is chief, as he that doth serve. So so that that is the exaltation of Christ, and so contrary to the world then, right? But then again, this is a concept. this is a very virtuous concept that the world now borrows from us, right? When they want to talk about servant leadership. But how easy it is to forget that the greatest among us is he that serves. And also Jesus said in Matthew 23, but be not ye called rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your father, which is in heaven. Recall that the word pope, right, comes from the Latin word papa, which means father. So when you say pope, we're calling him father. So again, a reminder, right, of Christ, right? Call no man your father. Not to say that you don't call your biological father your father, but that you don't acknowledge anyone else in that room that the heavenly Father ought to take. Right. Now, as all good Protestants know, particularly Reformed Protestants know, right, the office of the papacy was something that was corrupted, right, with such absolute power, right, going to become absolutely corrupt, and we have some very notorious popes in history, right? And for that reason, maybe some of us would have roundly condemned uh that idea in the first place, that one person could come up and take power, even if what that person did was even if that person didn't really abuse this power, right? And in the spirit of granting balance of perspective, right, and maybe raising some eyebrows, I want to ask, right, were there benefits to the papacy? And there certainly was, actually, right? As we can see, what happened, right, when the when the when the community was in crisis, right? There was a lack of leadership, right? The Bishop of Rome arose, right, protected the church, right, which was in the city, right? So he protected also not just the church, but also the other citizens of Rome, right, from barbarian invaders, right, and so preserved the lives of Christians, right, and also other people. Right? It provided stability to a crumbling empire, right? The West was really falling apart, and the papacy will provide stability even after the Western Roman Empire disintegrates in 476, right? So even after Rome fell, right, the Roman bishop was still looked to for stability, and and that is something valuable that they provided, right? And we have to give it to them, that in the early church, the bishops of Rome were the defenders of orthodoxy almost in almost every case of theological controversy. Arianism, Pelagianism, uh Nestorianism, right, Filioque. Almost every in every theological controversy, almost without fail, the Bishop of Rome would be on the right side theologically. Right. The whole Arian controversy was in the east, right? The West was adhered to Nicene orthodoxy from the start and throughout, right? It was the east who had to struggle and struggle and struggle and fight and then arrive at the Nicene Creed, right? So the Bishop of Rome was a defender of orthodoxy, protected against heresy. Okay, so uh, so I mentioned this before actually in the part on the heresies, in the lecture on heresies, that a bishop, right, this central authority figure, right, could serve as a defense against heresy, right, someone who will teach the truth. And and another very important thing, of course, is the missions. Right? Not just Gregory the Great, but other popes also. They did send out missions, right? And so much of the Christianizing of Europe, right, is uh, due to the missionary endeavors commissioned by the popes themselves. So I just want to mention these things not to like cause trouble and to say that okay the Roman Church is good, right? But to give you some balance of perspective and to see that even in an institution that was corrupt and turned into something very bad, right? God was pleased to use uh these particular power structures, right, to further his ends and protect his church, right? So and when we look at the early popes, right, they're really not quite the same, right, as the as what we think of as the as those popes who came out with all sorts of funny things that like indulgences and all that to uh to line their own pockets and all that. So these were many of these were devout uh and faithful men of God as well. Yeah. So with this I close. This is the last of my early church sessions. Although there's really so much more that ought to be taught about uh in the early church, but I think it's time that we have a that we have a break from it. Okay. Thank you.